Mom's new BF destroys. The last memory we have of our father, and Mom claims that he did it out of the goodness in his heart so that he can speed up our grieving process. Now she's outraged. Buzz no one wants to attend their wedding and we are cutting her off and kicking her out of the house. Back when my mom was in college she got pregnant with me. My dad was her boyfriend at the time, but she didn't want to have a baby at that time. After I was born she broke up with my dad and decided to give up all her custody rights to him. She left me completely in my dad's care and didn't want anything to do with me anymore. From that point on, my dad became my everything. He took on the responsibility of raising me by himself, of course, with a lot of help from my grandparents also. Honestly, I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything because of the three of them. My dad was always loving and present in my life. He made sure I felt wanted and cared for. My grandparents were amazing too. They were warm and kind and showered me with so much love that I never felt like there was a gap in my life. The three of them, my dad and my grandparents, were my family. My mom never even bothered to check in on me. She never called, visited, or tried to know anything about my life. It stayed that way until I turned 6 years old. By then, my dad had worked really hard and gotten himself a great job at a reputable company. We were able to move out of my grandparents' house and start living on our own. It felt like a fresh start for us. But then, out of nowhere, my mom decided to show up again. After years of not being in my life, she suddenly wanted to be part of it. She said she missed Dad and wanted to be part of our family. Honestly, I think most people in my position might have been happy to have their mother back in their life, but even as a kid I couldn't bring myself to like her. There was just something about her that rubbed me the wrong way, even when I didn't fully understand why. I never understood what my dad saw in her or why he was so quick to forgive her. He seemed smitten with her, almost blinded by how much she still cared for her. If it had been up to me, I wouldn't have wanted anything to do with her. She always acted like she was sort of a cool mom. From the very beginning, she insisted that I call her by her first name instead of addressing her as mom or mother, especially in public. She thought it made her seem younger or more relatable, but to me it just felt odd. As I got older her behavior became even more uncomfortable. In high school, whenever I brought friends over, she would act overly friendly with everyone, especially with the boys. This obviously wasn't normal and it made me feel embarrassed. I remember how many of my guy friends would tell me they had crushes on her. I hated hearing that, but I couldn't blame them because my mom would purposely act inappropriately with them. She would wear clothes that were way too revealing in front of them and would always make flirty comments to them. Once during my graduation party some of my friends and I were hanging out by the pool. Out of nowhere, my mom showed up wearing a tiny bikini that left nothing to the imagination. She then laid down and actually asked one of my guy friends to rub sunscreen on her. My other friends started to cheer and laugh. It was awkward and downright humiliating for me. I remember wishing so badly that she would just go back inside and let me have just one day in peace with my friends. Whenever I tried to bring up things like this with my dad he would always brush it off like it was no big deal. It was frustrating because I could see what was happening so clearly but he either didn't see it or chose to ignore it. Deep down, I always knew my mom didn't really love him. She was with him because it was easy and convenient. He was stable, financially secure, and completely devoted to her. She got everything she wanted from him, but I don't think she ever gave him the same kind of love in return. When she got pregnant with my brother it was another complicated situation. At first she was pissed. She didn't want another baby and told my dad she was planning to get an abortion. She kept saying how it would ruin her perfect body. They fought about it constantly and it wasn't easy to be around them during that time. But eventually, for reasons I'll never fully understand, she changed her mind and decided to keep the baby. She went through with the pregnancy and for that I'm so grateful. My brother means the world to me. I can't imagine my life without him and despite everything else, I'm glad he's here. Just like my mom was never a parent to me, she was never a parent to my brother either. It was always me and my dad who took care of him and made sure he was looked after. She was completely absent when it came to anything parental. She never cooked meals for us, never cleaned up after us and never spent time with us as a family. It's like she didn't care whether we lived or died as long as she could continue shopping or going out with her friends, with our dad's money every day. Because of all this, it was only natural that me and my dad and my brother grew really close over the years. We were a unit, our own little family within the larger household. We supported each other and we understood each other in a way that she never could. Over time, we just accepted that this was how things were. My brother and I stopped expecting anything from her. We seldom spoke to her or spent time with her unless we had to. The only times we really saw her were when we visited my dad after moving out of the house. Then everything changed just a year ago when my dad got sick. After feeling unwell for some time, he went for a series of tests and the diagnosis we got was devastating. He had cancer. I can't even put into words how painful it was to hear those words. What followed was a long, grueling journey of treatments and chemotherapy. It was exhausting and heartbreaking to watch him go through all of it, but my brother and I stayed by his side every step of the way. My mom, on the other hand, was completely detached from the situation. She acted as though it wasn't a big deal that her husband, the father of her children, was battling cancer. She carried on with her life as if nothing had changed. She kept herself busy with her usual routine of shopping trips and attending kiddie parties with her friends. It was infuriating and deeply hurtful to see how little she cared. My brother and I did everything we could for my dad, but her lack of support made everything so much harder. Despite all our efforts and the treatments, we eventually lost him. My dad passed away after months of fighting, and the loss has been incredibly painful for both me and my brother. I can't even begin to describe how much we miss him every day and how we can do anything to get him back. What makes the pain of losing our dad even worse is the way our mother has acted since his passing. To her, it seems like losing him was no big deal. She hasn't shown any real grief or sadness, no sign that she even misses him. It's as if his death hasn't impacted her at all, which is heartbreaking for me and my brother. Fortunately, my dad was thoughtful and had planned his will. He made sure that me and my brother inherited his house, while my mom received the money from his bank account. When the will was read, my mom was furious that she didn't get the house from him. She felt entitled to it and didn't hide her anger. She even threatened to take us to court over it, which was just ridiculous. She thought she could bully us into giving her what she wanted, but after consulting with lawyers she must have realized that she didn't have a legal leg to stand on. Eventually she calmed down and came to us with a request. She wanted to stay in the house rent-free. I immediately refused. I told her that if she wanted to live in the house she would have to pay rent just like any other tenant would. My refusal led to a huge argument between us. She accused me of being unnecessarily hard on her and said that I'd always treated her unfairly for no good reason. She even tried to guilt-trip me by claiming that Dad would have wanted her to stay in the house without paying rent. I stood my ground and told her firmly that Dad was no longer here and the house now belonged to me and my brother. It wasn't her decision to make anymore. If she wanted to stay she needed to pay up. It was as simple as that. In the end she reluctantly agreed to pay a minimal amount of rent. The truth is me and my brother are both doing well financially. We don't really need the money, so for us this wasn't about the rent itself. We just wanted to make it clear to her that this was no longer her house and we wanted to set boundaries. By creating a landlord-tenant arrangement, we also ensured that if things ever went wrong in the future, we would have the legal right to evict her if necessary. Since Dad's passing, Mom has wasted no time going back to her old ways. She started dating men left and right, which honestly didn't surprise us at all. That's just how she's always been. But then 2 months ago she introduced us to someone new, Jason. Jason is around our age, and to say it's disgusting to see our mother dating someone so much younger than her would be an understatement. The whole situation is uncomfortable and awkward. For reasons we don't fully understand, Jason seems to hate me and my brother. He's been openly hostile towards us from the start, and it's only gotten worse over time. You see, since Dad's death, my brother and I have been slowly sorting through and packing up his belongings from the house. It's been a tough and emotional process for both of us. That house holds so many memories of Dad's life, and going through his things feels like reliving all of it. We've been doing it carefully, taking our time, making sure everything is packed and moved with respect. By now, we've packed up and moved most of Dad's belongings, but there were still a few boxes left in the upstairs attic. Those boxes contained some of Dad's heavier items, and moving them all at once wasn't possible, so we decided to take care of them gradually. We thought they were safe where they were, at least for the time being, but Jason had other ideas. He's been complaining non-stop about how we're handling Dad's things. According to him, we're making a big deal out of it by carefully packing and keeping everything. He suggested multiple times that we should just throw it all away. He keeps saying that holding on to the belongings of someone who's passed away is pointless and that we'd feel lighter if we just got rid of it all. His words have been insensitive and downright cruel, but my brother and I have ignored him, focusing instead on honoring our dad's memory in our own way. Then, this week, something shocking happened. My brother and I went to the house to finally take away the last of Dad's possessions, only to find that the attic upstairs was completely empty. We stood there in disbelief. Those boxes, the last pieces of Dad's life we hadn't yet moved, were gone. When we asked Mom about it, she acted clueless, claiming she had no idea where the boxes were. That didn't sit right with me, so I turned to Jason. His response left me absolutely furious, and with a smug, nonchalant attitude he admitted that he had thrown them away. He said the boxes were cluttering the attic and that he needed the space to move some of his things there. He didn't even try to apologize. Instead, he justified his actions by saying it was better to get rid of those boxes and just move on. In that moment, I saw red. I couldn't believe his arrogance and complete lack of respect, not just for my dad, but for me and my brother. Those boxes weren't just clutter to us. They were pieces of our father's life, memories we'll never get back. And to have them discarded so carelessly as if they were trash felt like a slap in the face. Just to clarify, Jason lives in the house rent-free with my mom. Meanwhile, my mom only pays us a very nominal rent compared to what all the neighbors in the area pay for similar homes. It's a 4-bedroom house and these boxes were in an attic upstairs which mom rarely used or even kept anything there. If Jason didn't want the boxes there, he could have called us. Me and my brother would have come over immediately to move the boxes ourselves. Jason absolutely did not have to throw away those boxes. Mom also could have given us some heads up. At this point, it was obvious that Jason knowingly threw away Dad's things out of spite. He didn't care about how much those items meant to us or the memories they held. I yelled at Jason, demanding to know why he had done something so heartless. My brother, who was just as angry as I was, got right up in Jason's face and threatened to punch him. Jason's smug expression almost immediately faltered. For the first time, Jason actually looked scared. He started backing away from us but still kept running his mouth, insisting that he had gone through the boxes himself and decided they were just junk and not worth keeping. His audacity made my blood boil. Who was he to decide what was junk and what wasn't? Those things belonged to our dad. What made it worse was when my mom jumped in to defend him. Up until that moment, she had been acting like she didn't know anything about the situation. She feigned innocence, pretending she had no idea the boxes were gone. But when Jason started feeling the heat, she stepped in to back him up. She tried to justify his actions, saying that what Jason did was completely reasonable. According to her, Jason wasn't being malicious, he was just concerned for us. She had the nerve to say that Jason threw away Dad's things out of the goodness of his heart, claiming that he only did it to help us speed up our grieving process. Hearing her say that wasn't just disrespectful to us, it was disrespectful to my dad's memory. I told my mom angrily, and with every ounce of frustration I felt that neither she nor Jason had any right to decide how me and my brother should grieve. We had just lost our dad, someone who meant the world to us, and it was completely normal for us to take time to process that loss. Even if those boxes did contain what they considered junk, it wasn't their place to throw them away without even talking to us first. Where was their compassion? My words didn't seem to faze her. Instead, my mom scoffed and dismissed my feelings entirely. She told me that I was exactly like my dad, as if that was some kind of insult. She said it was infuriating how I could never let go of anything. It was as though she blamed me for valuing the things that connected me to Dad, the things that held memories of him. She accused me and my brother of being childish and sentimental and insisted that we needed to move on. Her words stung deeply. At that point, my brother had reached his breaking point. He looked her straight in the eye and told her that if Dad hadn't married her, he would have long since cut her out of his life. I've never seen him so furious. And honestly, I don't blame him. Jason and Mom kept trying to argue, but knowing that the conversation was going nowhere, I decided to leave with my brother before things escalated further. Since then, we have been furious with Mom. We feel robbed. Robbed of the last pieces of my dad's life. Robbed of the chance to decide what to do with those belongings. Robbed of a sense of closure, as if all of this wasn't enough. My mom has since been texting us nonstop. She's been going on about how Jason feels emasculated by the way me and my brother confronted him. She claims that we were too aggressive, that we made him feel small and humiliated. Now she's insisting that we owe Jason an apology for our behavior. So, Reddit, Ida Update 1. It's been a week since my post. While my brother and I have been furious and trying to decide what to do about everything that's happened, whether or not to take legal action against our mother and Jason for throwing away the boxes, we've also been painfully aware of how much of a hassle it would be. We've been weighing our options, trying to figure out the best path forward without causing even more chaos in our lives, as we are at the end of the day still grieving over Dad. And then, out of nowhere, my mother has just announced that she's getting married to Jason. Yes, you read that right. Our mother has decided to marry the very man who disrespected us, disrespected our dad, and showed zero remorse for throwing away his belongings. She didn't even have the decency to tell us directly. Instead, she made her big announcement on Facebook for the whole world to see. Her announcement post had multiple pictures of her and Jason all lovey-dovey, showing off her engagement ring like she was starring in some romantic fairy tale. In the caption, she gushed about how no man has ever made her feel the way Jason does and how he has made her happier than she's ever been in her entire life. The most gut-wrenching part, she added that she wished she had met him sooner. Her words feel like a deliberate slap in the face to my dad's memory. How can she act so carefree, so happy, as if Dad didn't just pass away a year ago? How can she even write things like that? She's knowingly shading Dad in the most public way possible, and it's disgusting. Understandably, everyone is shocked and pissed. My grandparents, who have always been the most loving and supportive people in our lives, are absolutely furious. They see her actions as a blatant act of disrespect to my dad's memory, and they're not wrong. My mom at this point is flaunting her new relationship in the most insensitive way imaginable. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and for everyone suggesting that we take our mom and Jason to court for throwing away the boxes, we've decided against it. It's not because we're okay with what they've done, far from it, but because the legal process feels like more trouble than it's worth emotionally and practically. Instead, my brother and I have come to a clear decision. We're going to kick them out of the house. We are planning on giving my mom and Jason a formal 1-month notice to vacate. Once they're out, we'll rent the property to someone else at a much more reasonable price range, something far closer to its actual value. Selling it isn't an option. This house is the last tangible connection we have to our dad. It's where we grew up, when so many of our memories with him were made, and there's no way we're letting it go. We're just not ready to part with something so deeply tied to Dad's legacy. Anyways, this week itself, my mom has started sending out her wedding invites. She even sent one to me and my brother. When my brother and I declined the invitation, she didn't take the hint. She tried reaching out to us directly, acting as though we were in the wrong for not coming. She asked us why we were still holding a grudge, as if this entire situation was just a minor misunderstanding and not the result of her repeated betrayals. She tried to guilt-trip us, insisting that as her children it was our duty to support her on her happy day regardless of whether or not we liked Jason. She even admitted that Jason's family doesn't fully approve of her because of her age and begged us to attend a wedding to make it look like she at least had her own family support. We flat out refused, and we told her in no uncertain terms that we wanted nothing to do with her or her wedding. We made it clear that she's no longer a part of our lives or our family. For all the hurt and damage she's caused, she doesn't deserve to have us there pretending everything is fine. Of course, instead of reflecting on her actions, my mom then turned to Facebook to play the victim. She made a dramatic post about how some family members can stab you in the back and how she's going through a difficult time all on her own. It's laughable, really, how she's painting herself as the wrong party when she's the one who has continuously disrespected and hurt us. Update 3. After speaking with a lawyer, my brother and I sent our mom an official notice to vacate the house. We also let her know in no uncertain terms that if she didn't move out in time, we were prepared to take legal action against Jason for throwing away our dad's belongings and would demand compensation for their value. This wasn't just some empty threat. We're serious about holding them accountable for their actions. Unsurprisingly, my mom didn't take this news well. She called us again, crying and furious, accusing us of being cruel and heartless. She told us that we had no right to kick her and Jason out of the house and complained that she liked living in such a big house. It was almost comical, like she expected us to overlook everything she's done just because she's comfortable living there. But my brother and I didn't back down. We reiterated our stance and made it clear that if she didn't comply, we wouldn't hesitate to escalate the matter to court. On top of all this, my mom is enraged that no one in the family is planning to attend her wedding. She's blaming us for turning everyone against her, which in a way might be partially true. I've been very open about what Jason did to my dad's belongings and how disrespectful both of them have been. Anyone who has asked me about this, I have given them the full story, and understandably people are furious with her. Many in the family can't fathom why she's rushing into a marriage with someone half her age, especially under these circumstances. It's not just about her moving on quickly after Dad's death, it's about her choice of partner and complete disregard she's shown for anyone else's feelings along the way. The bottom line is my mom now has no choice but to move out of the house. Whether or not she ends up marrying Jason is no longer our problem. We've drawn our boundaries and made it clear that we won't tolerate her selfishness or disrespect any longer. This entire situation has been exhausting and painful, but it's also been a lesson in standing up for ourselves. My brother and I are determined to protect what's left of our dad's memory, and we're not letting anyone, least of all our mom and Jason, take that away from us. Update 4. It's been 2 months since my last update. As expected, my mom and Jason refused to respect our notice and leave the house on time. When the day came for them to vacate, Mom outright defied us, telling us she'd take us to court if we tried to enforce the notice on her. We knew it was coming. Her refusal wasn't a surprise, but it still stung. After everything that's happened, the last thing we wanted was to go through more of her manipulation and control. At that point, my brother and I discussed how to handle things, and honestly, we decided to be a little petty. Just like my mom had been to us, we figured we'd use her wedding day as the perfect opportunity to show her the consequences of her actions. We knew that she and Jason would be out all day celebrating their wedding, so we waited patiently for the right moment. When the day finally arrived, we made our move. Since our keys were still the same and we still had full access to the house, we went in, packed up all of Jason and Mom's belongings, and put everything right out on the curb. We didn't just stop there. My brother and my uncle went the extra mile to change all the locks and install security cameras, ensuring that they wouldn't be able to just waltz back in like nothing had happened. We wanted to make sure that if Mom and Jason tried to push back, we had all the proof we needed. To make the moment even more dramatic, we invited some of our relatives over for dinner that night. All of us knew Mom and Jason wouldn't take their removal lightly, and we wanted to see their reaction. Late that night, Mom and Jason finally returned, and it was clear they were more than a little tipsy. They were fumbling around with their keys, trying them over and over on the door, completely unaware that we had already changed the locks. They were so focused on getting inside that it took them a while to realize something was wrong. Eventually, they started knocking on the door when they couldn't come in, and this is when my brother and I opened the door and we confronted them loud and clear, asking why they were trying to break into our house. Their faces were a mix of confusion and shock when they saw us standing there. My mom immediately started arguing, demanding to know why we were there and why we had changed the locks. But before either of us could say much more, my grandfather, who had come with us, spoke up. He loudly reminded her that this was our house, not hers, and that we had already given her a proper notice to vacate. He made it crystal clear that they no longer had any right to be here. Jason, as expected, tried to barge in and continue arguing. He was furious, his face turning red with anger as he tried to defend their right to live there. But my brother wasn't having any of it. He and my uncle stood firm, pushing Jason back when he tried to get closer. My brother then threatened to call the police if they didn't leave immediately. At this point, I pointed to the curb where we had already packed up all of their things and neatly arranged for them to pick up and leave without further hassle. I told my mom in no uncertain terms that all they had to do was take their stuff and go. No more arguments, no more drama. For a moment, both Mom and Jason looked outraged and humiliated. They tried to argue further, but it was clear that they were out of options. They had no legal grounds to stand on, and after everything, they could see that they couldn't file us any longer. So in the end they left defeated, humiliated, and without any choice but to walk away.